Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
More often, official dealers selling cars of different manufacturers offer their customers to buy a car on leasing terms. Many people are used to buying a vehicle by paying the full amount or on the terms of car loans. And leasing is something relatively new for citizens of the Russian Federation. But in reality, leasing has been working all over the world for quite a long time. According to statistics, about 30% of all purchased cars in the United States are bought under the terms of auto leasing. Therefore, it would be logical to learn more about the peculiarities of this method of purchasing a vehicle, how profitable it is, what are the pitfalls, and what is required to execute the contract. What it is. First, we will try to explain in simple language what car leasing is. In short, it is the lease of a vehicle, characterized by the presence of the right to buy the car. It cannot be said that in Russia there is an increased demand for cars under the leasing agreement. But gradually people are beginning to appreciate the true advantages of the scheme, and therefore are looking not only at car loans, but also at the terms of car leasing. It is not quite clear yet what a car in leasing means. This type of transaction provides for the presence of two contracts in one document. This is the lease of the vehicle and its further sale. First, the car is leased to the client, who must pay the lessor a certain amount of money, stipulated in the agreement, every month. It is important to understand that the client acts first only as a lessee, i.e., the car does not pass into his ownership, but remains with the organization. At the same time, lessees will be financially responsible for the property they use. This means that the client will have to buy insurance if the condition is stipulated in the contract, pay taxes, pay the fines earned, undergo mandatory maintenance, make repairs, buy fuel, change consumables, etc. Often all this is already included in the monthly payment. The client does not have the right to fully dispose of the car. He cannot sell, change, or donate the car. At the same time, the owner of the car, i.e., the lessor, has no right to take the car away from the client during the period of the contract. Advantages and disadvantages. Having understood what it means to take a car in leasing, you can think about the registration of such a deal. To do this, it is not superfluous to review the strengths and weaknesses of car leasing. It really has objective advantages, but it is also characterized by some disadvantages. To the pluses can be attributed: registration of the transaction does not require a large package of documents. Insurance is provided by the actual owner, i.e., the lessor. Legal entities and individuals can receive certain tax benefits. There is not always an overpayment for the purchased car. There are different ways to execute the contract. There are several options on how to close the deal. The amount of payments is less than on the terms of a car loan. Possibility to buy special equipment, democratic requirements to clients, insurance, and some other expenses are already included in the monthly amount for payments. Property acquired by leasing is not considered to be property, which is sometimes a really big plus. Does not affect the credit history in any way, allows you to take loans in parallel. But we do not forget about the disadvantages. There are several main disadvantages. Before leaving the country, you will first have to notify the organization where the contract was drawn up. Leased property with the right of redemption, the client cannot freely dispose of it. If the terms of the contract are not fulfilled, the lessor can simply take away the car without prior notice. When technical problems occur, the car can only be sent for diagnostics or repair to those car services that are approved by the organization. A down payment is required for legal entities and a security deposit for individuals. When a person pays the last installment, the deposit money is returned to him in full. Term of the contract. In the case of leasing, it is not more than 3 years. Therefore, it is worth calculating your capabilities before taking on financial obligations. The same car loan can be repaid within 5 years. Understanding and realizing how leasing works when buying cars, everyone sees for themselves how the advantages or disadvantages can affect their final decision. Many have indeed found leasing to be a great tool for acquiring the right car. Others, however, favor proven auto loan schemes. Experienced motorists and specialists note that the benefit of leasing becomes noticeable only when buying expensive cars at a price of 1 million rubles and above. In this case, you should not count on a huge benefit. If the car costs about 1 million rubles, for 3 years you will save up to 100,000 rubles compared to a car loan. Carefully read the terms of the contract and the schedule of payments, not just to get a benefit, but also not to run into trouble. Read also how to recognize a car reseller comparison with car loans and leases. In fact, leasing can be called a type of car lease, which has its own distinctive features. If we compare it with the classic concept of rent, car leasing has some nuances. A person can independently choose a vehicle that the company will buy at his own expense. The client is not limited exclusively to the fleet of vehicles that the organization has at its disposal. The car is operated on the basis of a financial lease agreement. Its application allows you to count on favorable tax benefits. The car in leasing is the subject of the agreement. It becomes the property of the client upon expiration of the contract. It is also interesting that until 2010, only legal entities and individual entrepreneurs could take advantage of car leasing programs. Private individuals were not allowed to such transactions. But now everyone can take advantage of a rather favorable offer under the leasing program. Many people are interested in what is more profitable when buying a car, credit or leasing. Whether leasing is so good or a loan to buy a car has more advantages. To understand what is better, it is necessary to understand the differences between them. Buying a car on credit terms, the following aspects come into play. The bank issues the loan. Moreover, each financial organization has its own interest rates. The bank decides whether to give the client a car loan or not. When buying a car on credit, the client is obliged to pay the full cost of the car in interest provided by the terms of the bank. The car is the property of the client, but if the installment is not paid, the bank can take away the car. In the case of car leasing, it is a long-term lease. Moreover, the lessee has the right to choose a suitable car. When the choice is made, the company buys the car and also takes care of all the issues related to documents, insurance, registration, with the state automobile inspection service, and so on. After that, the car is transferred to the client on lease terms. Leasing is characterized by a minimal package of necessary documents, which is not comparable to the bank's requirements for the preparation of papers. The client and the leasing company conclude an agreement, and the vehicle remains the property of the organization. Every month, the client has to pay for the operation and use of the car, additionally paying for insurance costs, etc. Leasing payments are often much less than the mandatory monthly payments on the loan. Formalization of the contract for individuals. Those people who find this type of transaction favorable have a natural question about how to lease a car. In general, car leasing is considered a simplified operation, but even here it is strongly recommended to consult a lawyer beforehand. This will help to avoid undesirable problems and exclude possible risks. To conclude a contract with a financial organization that is ready to provide a long-term lease of your chosen vehicle with the possibility of redemption, you need to go through several basic steps. Choose a suitable company, decide on the choice of vehicle, study the offers and terms of the contract, prepare a package of documents, conclude the contract, receive the vehicle. Payment of transport tax, MTPL and hull insurance is the responsibility of the lessor, since it is the lessor who is responsible for the vehicle being leased on a long-term lease with the right of redemption. Each of the stages should be approached with utmost care. Study all points of the contract, stipulate possible nuances, demand answers to all questions asked. This is the only way to make leasing as profitable and transparent as possible. After making the first mandatory payment, which is about 10 to 20% of the total cost, the customer pays a certain amount every month. It consists of the interest on the loan and the interest on the appreciation. The total interest according to the terms of car leasing is about 15 to 20%. The client has the right to pay the full cost of the car in advance, and no penalties will be applied for this. Another difference from the car loan, which often requires you to pay only in installments, and penalties are imposed for full early repayment. It is also important that the lessor is responsible for maintaining the car in good condition. At the end of the contract, the buyer can pay the residual value of the car, thereby getting it in full possession. But often individuals execute leasing without including the right of redemption. They use the car for some time, pay the rent, and at the end of the contract take another car. Although this practice is not very widespread in our country, this scheme is very effective in Europe and the USA. New cars, most often it is new cars that are bought on leasing terms. Such services are offered by many banks, financial organizations, and official dealers themselves. Moreover, most often the condition of the contract is mandatory redemption. Leasing a new car under a leasing agreement differs in that it requires a casco policy, in addition to the standard and compulsory CMTPL insurance. This makes it possible to compensate for damage if the vehicle loses its marketable value. By requiring casco, lessors try to protect themselves from possible losses. At the same time, the client can refuse hull insurance, and then the initial payment will increase. Read also, should we be afraid of the Chinese car industry? Used cars leasing is also available in the case of used vehicles. Since the value of such cars is underestimated, it is no longer necessary to take out hull insurance. The deal is also concluded on the terms of further redemption or return at the end of the contract. But when leasing cars from the secondary market, you should be extremely careful. Now works a lot of unscrupulous organizations that offer used cars allegedly on favorable terms of auto leasing. But in fact, the car turns out to be in a defective condition, and the responsibility for repair is transferred to the client. Therefore, before signing a contract for a used car, you need to check the technical condition of the car, request the inclusion of a warranty period for the car in the contract, choose the newest cars possible, check the accompanying documentation. Whether or not to use the possibilities of car leasing when buying a used car is a personal matter. There are pitfalls and risks that exceed the potential danger of buying a new vehicle. Who to contact? Before you buy a car in leasing, it is important not only to take into account the required characteristics of the purchased car, but also to choose the right organization with which you will cooperate. Quite often you can meet the names of such organizations as Europlan, Major, Alpha Leasing, and so on. But just rely on the recognizability of the financial company is not worth it. Here you need to take into account a wider range of requirements. If you want to minimize the risks and make the purchase of car leasing as profitable as possible, when choosing a company, take into account several important nuances. Financial statements. The client has the right to demand such documents. If the company has no problems with the financial current situation, they will have no reason to refuse. Conditions. Do not hurry to agree to the proposals of the first company. It is better to go around several offices, ask questions about leasing conditions and compare. Make the deal where it will be the most favorable. Testimonials. Always look for customer reviews. And do it better not through official sites, where comments are usually deleted, and leave only positive opinions. Talk to people, ask acquaintances, where leasing was formalized. Period of action in the field of auto leasing. Good companies have existed for a long time and have a stable history of providing their services. If the organization appeared quite recently and immediately offers incredibly favorable conditions, there is definitely a catch. On funds. Not all leasing companies have their own capital. If the company takes money to buy a car for the client not from its own accounts, it is better to refuse its services. It is important to understand that the client and the financial organization for a long time bind themselves by the contract. That is why it is necessary to make sure that the lessor is reliable and conscientious before putting your signature on the document. List of necessary documents. To execute a car leasing agreement with an individual, companies have certain requirements regarding the documents to be provided. The standard package includes passport, completed application form, driver's license, a document confirming the client's income, an employer-certified copy of your employment record book, if available. It should be understood that every financial institution wants to minimize its own risks. Therefore, it often makes a requirement for the mandatory provision of a 2NDFL certificate. If it is a legal entity, then an up-to-date tax return will be required. Stages of acquisition. Now directly about how to get a car in leasing. It is necessary to act step by step. The entire purchase procedure is divided into several stages. Selection of the car. It acts as the subject of the contract. The client has the right to choose a car at his discretion as among the available fleet of the company and among the missing cars. The lessor buys the vehicle, the company's choice. If you know exactly what kind of car you want, you need to find a favorable leasing company ready to provide the appropriate subject of the contract, insurance. An insurance policy is obligatory for the subject of the contract, in addition to compulsory MTPL insurance. Also, leasing companies often work only on the terms of casco registration, preparation and submission of documents, registration and signing of the contract. When the parties sign the documents, the car is transferred to the client for use on a lease basis with or without the option to buy it out. Leasing is considered to be a rather favorable and interesting way to get a car, not being able to pay its full cost, or wishing to buy a car in ownership. This way you can use the car for some time, paying as for rent, and then return the vehicle to the lessor. But, as in the case of car loans, long-term car leasing is a potentially dangerous type of contract in situations where the client is not financially stable. If he violates the terms of the agreement, the company will repossess the vehicle and issue no compensation.